Greetings. Welcome to Bob by Nyame. I'm your guide and host, Grace Kunadu. On this episode, we're going to talk about the recent and ongoing Hurricane Melissa. Yes, Hurricane Melissa just left the Caribbean basin. It has hit the eastern seaboard, and as of this recording, it is, pummeling and flooding New York City, unfortunately. So my prayers and heart go out to everyone who's there, including my family, who happen to be there. I'm sure if you have family there as well. Hope you all are dry, hope you all are safe, and hope you all hunker down until this particular storm or the remnants of it blows over. Now, I want to focus on this hurricane precisely because there's something very important in this moment that I don't want you to miss, or at least I don't want you to miss my interpretation of it. And here it is. You see, this hurricane is not so much about a particular or a Category 5 tropical storm that became a hurricane, but it is about God versus humans. And I want to frame it that way. And you may be curious as to why. So I have been going back and forth between New York and Jamaica, among other places, over the past few years. And I'm actually in Jamaica right now with family, sort of working through what has happened in the wake of this particular hurricane. And if you have loved ones here as well, again, my hearts and prayers are with them. Hopefully they are safe, they are alive, which is the most important thing. And they have, therefore, the opportunity to rebuild. Now, I say all this to say that while here on the island, a lot of people were not taking the hurricane seriously, including the government, not giving the sufficient advisories, sufficient guidance as to where to go. Unlike Cuba, whose president had in fact evacuated close to 1 million people days before the storm actually hit Cuba. And so people were partying, they were carrying on, they would say, it's just going to be some rain, and that's going to be a big deal. And what I want to make clear is not so much about those people, because there were other people that were also in prayer, that were also in meditation, that were also taking it seriously, that were also preparing. People were going to the mountains and hills, people who don't have shelter, don't have safe places, don't have those kinds of resources, were traveling and trekking and climbing to find some safe ground, which happened to be the high ground. Some of you know about Jamaica, very mountainous, just like Ghana, West Africa, among other places in the world. And so you have this dichotomy between those people that were just carrying on as usual and those people that were taking it seriously. And what people fail to understand and fail to appreciate is that the Almighty is just like a parent who cares and loves his children or her children. And the Almighty works this way. The same way that a parent can be upset or angered by the misbehavior of the children, not because the parent does not care, precisely because the parent does love and care, they will want to discipline, some may say punish that child or those children to show how much care and love the parent has. And that's precisely what's going on, because Hurricane Melissa is the Almighty incarnated. It is God. And so it has been sweeping through the region of the Caribbean, but also parts of North America, that, have been carrying on in a certain way that is unlike or unbefitting the divine, right? You can read into that however you want to. And the same in Jamaica. So, for example, where I am, we were unscathed, and precisely because, we were in prayer, we were making sure that we are in connection and in concert with the Almighty all along. And so we barely got a little bit of rain, some wind, that's about it. The next day, we were just cleaning up some leaves on the ground. And I kid you not, other places, not fortunate. And those are places that hit hardest were hit precisely for reasons that I mentioned before, that were living in a certain manner, living in a certain way, that are not up to the code, up to the standards of the values and principles that the Almighty has laid out throughout the centuries. Now, let me give you a quick history of those laws. So we can go back to ancient Egypt or ancient Kemet, where the concept and the laws of Ma'at, about 42 are associated with this divine principle called Ma'at, including affirming life, including being nonviolent, including, arguing or being angry without resorting to violence, including affirming life. These are including living in truth. These are just a sampling of the 42 principles that were laid out to guide what human behavior on contact and conduct, as befitting the Almighty. In other words, these were laid out. These are defined principles. These are God-given principles that were put into the principle of Ma'at, or captured by that principle, and laid out for people to live according to. Fast forward about almost 10 centuries later, right? We find that the Hammurabi Code was developed in ancient Babylonia, right, which is further east of ancient Egypt, or Kemet. Hammurabi was the sixth ruler of ancient Babylon, and he had elaborated this code of laws, essentially almost 282, that laid out similar kinds of principles, including a very familiar one called eye for an eye, and other kinds of principles in terms of trying to have right conduct and behavior that would guide people's conduct, guide people to live according to the law, divine law. And so those codes were developed precisely for the same reason that the code of Ma'at were developed, the principle of Ma'at were developed. You fast forward into the religion that we refer to as Christianity, what the Romans call the Jesus movement, whatever you want to call it. Those particular stories that were put together, they were parables, and they were set again to guide people's behavior and conduct to live according to the divine. Fast forward, Islam comes on the scene, and when Islam comes, Islam, of course, organizes the Quran into about 112, maybe 114 surahs, or chapters, and these were again meant to guide human conduct, guide human behavior according to what? The Almighty. And if I miss something for a moment, let's say go back for a moment, the Buddha from India and of course Confucius from China, they lived around the same time. In fact, they died about 4 or 5 years apart. Confucius' code was about righteous conduct and living. Buddha, of course, same thing, about enlightenment, righteous conduct and living. Again, guide human behavior and conduct. Fast forward, we get to let's say the Odu Ifa among the Yoruba people. That is the sacred divination system referred to as the Odu Ifa, a collection of stories, verses, as well as parables and proverbs meant to what? Guide human conduct using the principles of the Orishas as the medium for that particular guidance, right? And there are about 284 Odu Ifas, if I'm correct. I may be off by a few, but you get the point. Again, to guide human behavior. We fast forward to the early 18th century and get to the Asante people, my folks in Ghana, the Akan people. But in this case, the Asante variant, and you find a Konfonoche elaborate 77 laws, again, to guide human conduct behavior, and those laws were given by Nyame, or the Almighty, or the Creator. And so, in short, Hurricane Melissa is the discipline that comes from not living according to these particular laws that have been laid out over the century. In other words, the same Almighty, the same Creator, the same God yesterday is the same God today and tomorrow. It hasn't changed, right? He hasn't changed. What has changed is what? Human distance from that principle, human distance from those values, human distance from those codes of conduct. That's what's changed. And when, of course, things are out of order, the earth, the Almighty has a way of what? Bringing things back into balance. And so Hurricane Melissa is a part of that balance. And so don't be surprised where it stays, where it lingers, where it hasn't hit, where it hit hardest, who have been affected by it, because this particular hurricane is not simply a meteorological, a ecological, a oceanic, or other kind of phenomena. It is indeed, in my view, very much, the Creator himself that have come to try to cleanse and bring order to where there's disorder, to bring balance to where there's imbalance, and to cleanse the way to do that. Much like planting for the field for whatever crops you may have in mind. You first clear the land by, of course, putting it to fire. And by fire is meant to cleanse it in preparation, that is, the ash from the fire is nutrition for the soil, and it prepares the ground for being what? Planting anew. So, I hope this interpretation resonates and has value to you. And if it does, kindly click the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, share with others. Until next time, you all stay safe, stay dry, stay together, and stay well.